The three theorems of psychohistorical quantitativity. The population under scrutiny is oblivious to the existence of the science of psychohistory. The time periods dealt with are in the region of 3 generations. The population must be in the billions for a statistical probability to have psychohistorical validity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 10 of Foundation Analysis, the season finale, episode 10, The Leap. And of course, I am your host, Brent Stewart. So for our final episode, we are going to hop right in and talk about how there's a absent or different intro. We get a monologue from Gale about dreaming being a leap of faith and believing what happens to your soul when you're asleep. And while we get that narration, we get to see Harry Seldon's coffin drift into the stars and reconstitute itself as the monolith. And then we get the name of the show, Foundation, to scroll across this spacescape we have rendered for us, and it is very good, very cool, very nice. I like it. Neat change for the season finale. So the episode starts proper on Terminus. We pick up right where we left off with Harry regaling the gathered parties about what the plans are for their future, if they are to walk the path the Foundation has laid out, or more specifically, Harry has laid out. And Harry starts to tell about the history of their two peoples, the Thespins and the Anacreons, and how they were going to be joined together, but then there was a plot to pit them against each other to prevent a power block on the rim of the galaxy from forming. And there's a great line from Jared Harris, it's like, victory is written by the winners, and I don't see you two winning a whole lot. And while that is very interesting and a great way to motivate people and align them together, do we think it's true? And more importantly, does it matter if it's true? But we continue on, and Harry says that the Foundation needs 3 strong pillars in order to survive the trials that will be coming to it as the fall continues to happen around them. And he mentions that they can build a fleet using the Invictus as a template, and that is quite interesting and neat. But there is a very interesting moment where Harry asks where Gale is, which is kind of like a record scratch moment, because it means that the two Harrys are not connected. They are not networked. So there's 2 of them out there. And one was supposed to go to the second Foundation, and one is with the first Foundation. It makes me wonder if at some point there would have been a drift between the two. And could we have had dueling Harrys? That would have been a very interesting little what if. And there's a great little moment after he asks where Gale is, where Salvor Hardin approaches and takes credit for doing all of the things, and the AI of Harry thanks her. We then cut to Trantor, and Day and Dusk are in the cloning vat repository, and they are contemplating what to do with Dawn. And of course, Dusk says, you know what must be done, because Dusk is very much the hardliner. So then Day goes to Dawn's room to confront them, and there is a great scene about wants and desires, and there is clearly an acknowledgement that Brother Dawn is different, but there is also similarities to what Lee Pace's Brother Day has described during his experiences on the Maiden, and so there's that little bit of, they're not completely different. It's just a slightly different flavor. And during the little interview, Dawn admits that they wanted to be Day, that they studied, that they practiced, that they knew they were not quite the same for a very long time. But more than that, they yearn to be an actual person. They feel disconnected. They feel incomplete. So that's interesting to, when you stop and think about it, because at a glance, you're just like, well, they have everything they could possibly want. How could they not be happy? But Brother Dawn makes some very valid points. So then we cut back to Terminus, and Harry is continuing to wax poetic on the mountaintop, or the hillside, and reveals the true purpose of the Foundation. And has a great little poetic saying that the humanity is a chorus, and the chorus has been stifled by a single voice, the voice of empire, and that in order for humanity to survive, it needs to no longer be controlled by a single voice. And he then explains how they can fake the planet's death, allowing them to be left alone and grow and prosper, and allow them to gather their strength before they are rediscovered and a inevitable conflict happens. And then, the conversation is steered towards the vault and its origin, and how the defense system and all of that was woken up by the Anacreons showing up and explaining Harry's origin and how his consciousness is there and all of that. And one of the kids asks if we'll see them again, and he says, "You will," and he gives a bit of a vigilance pep talk, letting everyone know to keep the stiff upper lip and all of that. Very almost British. And then as Harry turns to leave, which is a little weird because he's a hologram, he could just pop out of existence, it's fine. Salvor confronts him about the visions she is having, about how they were given to her just as she needed them, and explained things and got everything lined up and was able to resolve this crisis. And Harry Seldon says that they didn't come from him. But an important note is that the null field didn't affect her, and should have probably brought that up because that kind of might be important. So then we cut to Trantor, and we have Azura's sentencing. Day makes his case as they walk through the garden for his ruling style. How he says it's a strange burden to not be burdened, which is interesting. And there is some superficial merit to a lot of his arguments, but it's one of those things where an absolute is not going to work with what you are wanting or needing for a productive long-term rule. Then Day starts to talk about his legacy and how he views Brother Don as his son, and he is the father, even though they are brothers, and etc. But they are all family, and they care for each other, and ultimately she has robbed Brother Day of his personal legacy because the individual he considers his son is now tainted or destroyed, and or that bond, etc., etc. It's an interesting sort of peek into the dynamic of the brothers, or at least this current iteration of Brother Day's perspective on things. And then while they sit at a little pond or pool, Brother Day says how they tracked back all of her family genetically, and every person she has had a contact with and who they've had contact with. So an extended network that would be her legacy, the people who would remember her if she died. And they are all removed by the actions of Brother Day, all in an effort to destroy the legacy of her, and by extension, the coup, underground threat, etc., the insurgents. But I find it interesting because, yes, you might have removed her, or the records of her, or anyone who might remember her, but in creating this giant void, you've also created more dissidence. You've given people a reason to question things, to become curious, to look into why, what, where, and how, and ultimately that probably is not something the Empire wants. They want their ability to be capricious to be ignored, not have a spotlight put on it, because if you do, you start to get more dissidents. And then Azura is informed of her fate, how she will be restrained and fed intravenously and shrouded for the rest of her life. She will experience nothing more, but she will know what she took from Brother Day, which is a horrifying existence that is S tier awful. Do not want. No, I get you're hurt, but that's just cruel and unusual. So then we cut back to Terminus, and there's a great little back and forth between Salvor and her mom. They're having a heart-to-heart, and Salvor's mom is coming to grips with the fact that Harry lied to them, gave them busy work, and she is feeling hurt and spurned, and Salvor's kind of well, ultimately what's changed? The Empire is still not good. They were going to fall. Instead of making a time capsule or a repository of knowledge, we're going to be the ones building. That's ultimately not the worst. And then they mention how they have to have their own plan now, which, yeah, motivational and uplifting and all of that, but also kind of flows counter to the theme of the show with psychohistory. But then again, lately, especially once Harry came back as an AI, a lot of ego was coming off the screen. So maybe the show is a little bit of a deconstruction or a critique of the themes of Foundation, which would be interesting. So then we cut to still Terminus, but now it is Farah's funeral. And there's a great little moment between the lieutenant and Salvor, and they bury a tree, and, the lieutenant and Salvor say that Farah and her respected each other in their own way, and how they've brought a little bit of Anachron to Terminus, which is interesting considering they don't have jump technology. They would have had to have had that with them the entire time and have it not be blown up on their ship. But hand-wavium aside, we have a bit of a time lapse after the tree is buried, and we get to see the Foundation grow kind of like as a colony and establishment. Another community shoots up, and over this time lapse there is a monologue of how it takes more power to build than it is to destroy. What happens to the Invictus and how Hugo becomes the captain. The Invictus view screen also is a thing I noticed this go around. Also, I didn't notice this, but it was pointed out to me. The Invictus's view screen / bridge viewport is very reminiscent of the ship from Event Horizon, which is a great movie, but an interesting comparison. So we cut back to Terminus, or at least the ground Terminus, instead of orbit. And Hugo is returning from being up on the Invictus, and they talk and chat and catch up after some time apart. And apparently it is going to take them 18 months to build another ship, which is a real good turnaround. I don't know what kind of shipyard you guys are building that quick, but that's actually super impressive. And then we have Hugo and Salvor enjoying each other's company. And after that, Salvor leaves in the night, and she starts to see another vision, and she follows it, and it is Gale as a child. And she jumps into the ground, but it ripples like it's water. So it's a really, really great shot. And so then the question becomes, is this genetic memories? Are these visions, or are these fragments? There's a lot to be explained. And so then she goes to the vault and asks, if it's not you, Harry, then who is it? So she doesn't get the answer she's looking for from Harry. So she goes to her mom, and, again, there's the revelation or confirmation that Salvor is actually the daughter genetically of Gale and Raish. So, that a thing. And, Salvor realizes or clicks that that's why the stars have always been calling to her, and she needs to leave. And Salvor, resolves that she needs to leave now, because if she doesn't, she'll lose the courage, lose the momentum, and got to keep that going. And she tries to break away clean, but as she is powering up the beggar from outside, and heading up the gangway, she gets stopped by Hugo, and there's a lovely little goodbye that is likely a permanent one. Feels real permanent. And, Hugo has the great line of, it's not love if it doesn't hurt, which, yeah, I feel like I can attest to that. So feel you on that one, buds. And there's also a great, little question he asks of, will you be mad later? Or she asks to Hugo, will you be mad later? And he's like, no, how could I be? And so it's really quite lovely, and you really get the feeling that the two of them care for each other. We then cut to Trantor, and it is Dawn's trial, and Dem, gathers up Day and escorts him to the throne room. And as they are walking, there's a bit of a discussion, a back and forth they have, and how he says that he loves her, and she says that she loves him, and that, love is programming, because Dem is programmed to love Empire, and Dem rebuttals that, well, all love is programming, genetic or other. And then as they are about to enter the throne room proper, Dem puts her hand on the back of Day, much like she did with one of the Dusks, which is like, oh no, this isn't going to end well. So obviously Dusk, is very angry and hates Brother Day because he's a genetic deformity, an abnormality. He's a perversion and must be destroyed. Whereas Day, given his recent experience with the Maiden and spirituality, is much more open to change. I also think there's a little bit of a personal investment there seeping through, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But Dawn and Demerzel react to these outbursts and are a little taken aback, but not more than Dusk and Day from each other, and they actually fight and come to blows. And Dawn, in a moment of looking for comfort, turns to Demerzella and asks her not to let them kill him, and she tells him that she won't. And as they are arguing and not exchanging blows like a fist fight, but, kind of smacking and rebuttaling with truncated philosophy or points of view, Brother Dusk says that history bends to us because we are Empire. And at that moment, that's when Demerzella snaps Brother Dawn's neck. And as his body falls to the floor, she turns or looks up to Brother Day and Brother Dusk and says that she is loyal to the Empire, loyal to the Cleonic genetic dynasty. And it's a thing. It's a powerful moment. It is really, really well done, very well acted. Lee Pace sells the heck out of it. And yeah, there's just it's a pin drop moment. So then, we have a dead Brother Dawn, but what of his mind? His mind has been uploaded and transferred to the prepped clone, but is the clone corrupted? And what of his experiences in this other body, in this other genetically different body? Does that make his perspective invalid? Are they going to decant a backup from a previous generation? There's some ambiguity in the system, which I'm a little curious to figure out. But then, Demerzella and Day have the stare down before she leaves. And Brother Day is told by Dusk that he can dispose of the body. We then cut to the mural and Brother Dusk wanting to get rid of the bit of the hunt, the Gilly Raptors. And instead of being able to remove them, he simply has an outburst and throws his color palette against the wall and makes it all blend together into this mess, which is a great visualization of the turmoil of his soul, we'll say. And Brother Day goes to bury Dawn, we will say. And it's sad. It's shot incredibly well. Lee Pace sells the heck out of the scene. It very as much as, laying a body to rest and them disappearing. And it works incredibly well. My one thing is yo, my dude, you are real close to that atomization beam. Maybe back up a couple inches. After it fires, are you sure you still got your pinky and half your kneecap? Real close there. There's no safety lines. But then we have the Shadow Master come up and talk to Brother Day and lets him know of the genetic corruption, that Day has also been altered, and they are putting Dusk under review to see if they have been altered, which means that, Demerzella just killed Brother Dawn for being genetically different. Does that mean that Demerzella can kill Brother Day? And is it possible that she killed Brother Dawn because that was the only way she could hurt Brother Day? Circling back to the whole events on the Maiden. It's a head scratcher. They've also corrupted the genetic repository, the body of Cleon the First, and that is definitely a desecration, we'll say, which Brother Day follows up by desecrating the body himself by destroying the crypt, or at least breaking containment on it, which is a thing I would feel that as soon as something hit the outside shell of his tomb with any significant force, it would immediately set off a bunch of sensors and a whole bunch of guards would come running. But then we cut to the last scene on Trantor for the season, and Demerzella is in her room, and she goes to touch up her face with the tools we have seen her use repeatedly throughout the season. And she is overwhelmed by what happens and throws away the instrument, and then claws the flesh off of her face in this very visceral, very interesting scene. To see how Demerzella will react in the second season with everything is going to be quite interesting. just absolutely fantastic. The effects are amazing. It's really, really great. So then we cut to 138 years later, and we have a monologue, the continuation of the monologue from Gale of Leaps of Faith. And she has arrived at Synax and is finding it to be a dead planet, it appears. And so her pod is able to make it into the atmosphere and land, and there is some survival gear. She takes a cylinder and tosses it in the ocean, and it makes a boat. What? Okay, sure. And then we have the pod, start to sink. No distress buoy, no beacon, no like SOS. Okay, sure. This is a remarkably resourceful pod, and yet not super useful apparently. And Gale is eventually able to find a dead settlement. It appears to be the one she grew up in. It's just the top of the main building. And as she is exploring the remnants of the area as best she can, because it's all underwater, she starts to see something underwater that has crashed, we will say. A flashing red light, and it is a cryopod. And the individual she pulls out of the cryopod is Salvor, which, of course, is her kid. And so there's a great little back and forth, a lot of potential, and a great setup for the next season. And it's also going to be really interesting to see a parent-kid relationship where the kid is older than the parent. I mean, even though they're genetic parents and parent that raised is not the same, but you know what I mean. It'll be interesting to see. But overall, great season, great show. I'm excited for season 2. Not sure what I would do differently, but it's very cool, very interesting. I'm stoked that we will have more of Jared Harris. I'm stoked that we will probably have more Lee Pace because he is great, and I expect the Empire genetic dynasty to continue on for a good chunk of time. I don't think this is the last we'll see of it. I think it'll evolve in some way out of necessity. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the season. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast, and this has been a neat little experiment. Let me know what you think of it, and we will see you around the universe. This project is supported by the On the Origin of Battlemechs podcast Patreon. If you enjoy it and want to hear more of my discussion of Foundation, please let me know and possibly give your support there. Special thanks to my friend Treble for the intro and outro. Have a good one. Bye.
Don't you see? It's galaxy-wide. It's a worship of the past, a deterioration, a stagnation.